Welcome. This is Unit 1, Nervous System. I've taught some of this in other lessons, but that's okay. There's a lot of new stuff in here that I've never taught before. This is updated for 2024 standards. Let's get started. So the nervous system, part of biology, we've got the brain, nervous system. What we're going to talk about are how the neuron works. We're going to talk a lot about the chemicals, the neurotransmitters, a little bit about hormones, and we're going to get a little technical, but that's okay. Let's move on. All right, so here's the deal, and this is why I've been struggling making this video. First of all, every video on YouTube has way too much information. Pause and read this. So basically, you're not going to be asked to label parts of the neuron. They're not going to give you like a diagram and say, what is this? They're not going to do that on the AP psychology exam. But there's always going to be some sort of application of behavior, like what happens if this problem occurs, okay? But there are a couple of parts that you need to know based on what I've seen, based on what the College Board has given me. So let's just go ahead and take a look at that. Pause this if you want to look at this. This is the CED, moving right along. Okay, I don't think it's as hard, it's like, how much do you need to know? In years past, I would have my students draw this and have them memorize, like, what are dendrites, what are buttons, and it's all fun stuff. Honestly, I have seen questions on the axon and the myelin sheath. So anyway, so let me just go over this real quick. So the cell body of a neuron is called the soma. Soma means body. Okay, that's where I guess energy is stored to some extent. I don't know. But here's the deal. So dendrites, dendra means tree in Greek. I don't think you need to know that anymore, but they receive neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin from other neurons. So if a neuron receives enough stimulation, okay, think like you're flushing a toilet, are you flushing it hard enough to actually make it flush? Okay, are you pulling the trigger on a gun hard enough to make it fire? Well, if a neuron receives enough dopamine or enough serotonin or whatever, then it's going to get stimulation, it's going to build up, and it's just going to build and build and build, and it shoots an electric message down the axon. The axon, and I've seen this once based on the questions that I've been given by the College Board. Axon, think of it, the axon is like an electric cord, okay, an electric cord. Like the copper insides of an electric cord. So the message goes down the axon. But just like an electric cord, the axon is covered by the myelin sheath. The sheath is a protecting cover of the axon. It protects the axon and it makes the messages go faster. All right. Now, without the myelin sheath, the messages will not go down the axon as fast or as efficiently. Okay. So at least understand axon is like an electric cord. It's the spine of the neuron. And the message will shoot down the axon and the buttons will squirt neurotransmitters to other neurons. And each neuron can have up to 24,000 connections with other neurons. So somehow, and this is the big mystery, somehow, if you take trillions of these connections, then somehow we are who we are. And it's one of the big mysteries of psychology and of the world. Okay? All right, so I want you to understand the word myelin sheath. Sheath means protection. It's like something in that you put the axon inside to protect it. These are sheaths, but the myelin sheath protects the axon. Axon shoots the message down to the buttons so the buttons can squirt neurotransmitters. Okay. All right. So write this down. So there are two types of cells in the nervous system. You have neurons, which are basically the neural cells that transmit information, such as neurotransmitters. Then you have glial cells. Glial cells make myelin that make the myelin sheath, and they also protect neurons, and they hold them together. Think glial glue. So glial cells make myelin sheath. Okay. All right, moving right along. All right, do this question. The answer is B. Glial cells support insulation waste removal, while neurons transmit electrical impulses between cells. All right, moving right along. All right, I need you to write this down. MS, multiple sclerosis, is caused by damaged myelin. So this is what myelin normally looks like. It looks like an electric cord, okay, the rubber that goes around an electric cord. But if it gets damaged, then the transmission doesn't happen as fast, and then you have trouble moving. You might get the shakes, or all this might happen to you, okay? Vision, muscle weakness, okay? All kinds of bad stuff happens to you. All right, so remember the main kind of question is what happens, how does it affect behavior? Well, one result could be multiple sclerosis. All right, do this question. The answer is you damage the myelin, you're going to get neural messages will travel slowly down the axon, leading to motor impairment. Okay, moving right along. All right, do this. The answer is MS. Okay, moving right along. All right, so how does a neuron fire? All right, so first of all, I want you to know that it's electrical on the inside of a neuron, but it's chemical on the outside of a neuron. The chemical meaning neurotransmitters. So because of all this electricity going on inside a neuron, you're going to get chemicals that get squirted outside by the buttons to other neurons, because neurons don't touch. So you get these little neurotransmitters that kind of just swim around between them. This firing of a neuron is called the action potential. Just think of like a firing of like a gun, like electricity going down the axon. It's the firing of a neuron, and it leads to the squirting of neurotransmitters. Okay? All right, moving right along. Action potential. All right, that is the firing of the neuron. Go ahead and draw this graph on your notes. So neurons are kind of like guns. They get ready to fire, so you load a bullet in it. Okay, so they get ready to fire. That's called depolarization, when you're getting ready to fire. Okay, then boom, they fire. That's the action potential. Then the gun isn't ready to fire for a little bit. That's called repolarization. You don't need to know that, but you need to understand that there is a time when the neuron can't fire. It's tired. That's called the refractory period. Okay? And I'll be honest with you, this could explain why if you have too much excitement on a Sunday, Monday, you feel depressed or low energy because you had too much excitement on Sunday, because all your neurons were firing on Sunday, and now all your neurons are in a refractory period. But basically, the neuron gets ready to fire. The gun gets cocked, and then it fires. Then it loses its charge, and then for a little while, the neuron cannot fire again. That's called the refractory period. And then the process starts over and over and over again, times a billion neurons. One more thing, you need to understand the all or none response. It's like a gun or like a toilet. The gun's either going to fire or it's not going to fire. A toilet's either going to flush or it's not going to flush. There's no half flushing. It's either going to fire totally or it's not going to fire at all. That's what a neuron does. That's called the all or none response. So how are neurons like toilets? Well, there's depolarization where it's getting ready to fire. That's the tank filling with the water. Action potential would be the flush. So fire, that's the flushing. Then the refractory period would be where it's not ready to flush again. It's in a recovery phase. And then the all or none principle says that the toilet will flush or it won't. There's no halfway flush. Okay. All right, moving right along. I hope that makes sense. Okay, do this question. The answer is C. It's electric charge produced chemically inside, but it's chemical outside. It's electric inside, chemical outside. Electric inside, chemical outside. I don't think this is an AP question, so let's move on. All right, do this one. The answer is absolute refractory phase. What did I call it? Refractory period. I called it a refractory period. Okay, so refractory means that it's not going to happen yet. Okay, it means it's resting, it's recovering. All right, here we go. Do this. Sequence of shifts in the electrical charge of a neuron. Boy, the way that they phrase that. Anyway, it's the firing of the neuron. The answer is the action potential, the firing of the neuron. All right, do this. The answer is the refractory period. Okay, that's the time when it needs to rest. Okay. All right, the graph shows which of the following. So what is the big picture of this? What is this? The answer is the process of neurotransmission, action potential. Okay. Which psychological principle is represented in the area highlighted in the graph? So it fires, and then here it's just resting and recovering. The answer is refractory period. All right. Area 2. What is this going up the roller coaster? Okay, what is that? All right, the answer is depolarization. That's the getting ready. That's the toilet filling with water before it flushes. That's loading a bullet into the gun. That's depolarization. And then it fires, and then it rests, and that's the refractory period. All right, moving right along. All right, that's it. In my opinion, the rest of this is easy. What are neurotransmitters? I've already taught you a lot of neurotransmitters in other chapters like the brain. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that are released by terminal buttons through the synapse. You don't need to know that, but you do need to know examples of neurotransmitters. The ones that you need to know are dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, acetylcholine, and norepinephrine. Let's go over them. Acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that deals with motor movement. So when you are dreaming, your acetylcholine is blocked, so you don't move while you're dreaming. It's also involved with memory. If you look at Alzheimer's patients and you look at their brain, there is a problem with their acetylcholine receptors. Another thing, when you do nicotine, like vaping or smoking, it mimics acetylcholine. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but maybe supposedly it gives you energy. I don't know. I'm not a vapor or a smoker. But nicotine gives some people energy. So taking acetylcholine can give some people energy. Not me, but it just doesn't work for me. Okay, here's another thing. It's myasthenia gravis. I guess that's how you say it. It is a problem with acetylcholine receptor sites. So if you have a problem with acetylcholine receptor sites, you might have Alzheimer's, but also you might have this. It's a disease where people get weak. Muscles don't communicate with the nerves. So if it's affecting your memory, you'll have Alzheimer's. But if it's affecting your muscles and your movement, you'll have this. Okay, moving right along. Dopamine. I know that, I've already mentioned dopamine is where you have fun and anticipation, pleasure. But if you have too much dopamine, you're going to have schizophrenia. A dopamine is about awareness. So think about it as if you're so aware, you're aware of things that don't exist. But if you have too little dopamine, you're going to have the shakes. You're going to have Parkinson's. Parkinson's is where you have too little dopamine. And to treat Parkinson's, you're going to take something that's kind of similar to cocaine, believe it or not. Okay, anyway. So here is an ad for a Parkinson's medication, normal dopamine, but after you take the medication, you're more normal than you were before. So Parkinson's is caused by a problem with dopamine. So is schizophrenia. Serotonin. It is complicated, but it depends where the serotonin is. You have serotonin in your brain, you have serotonin in your stomach. But if you have too little serotonin, you are likely going to be depressed and you might have obsessive compulsive type disorders. And antidepressant medications affect your serotonin levels. We'll talk about that later. All right. Endorphins. When you exercise and you create pain in your muscles, your body will give you endorphins that make you feel better. When you eat spicy food or listen to music or you laugh, you get endorphins. Hugs, I'm not so sure. That might be oxytocin. When you take an opioid for pain, then opioids are mimicking endorphins. They are an agonist. I'll explain what that means later. But when you're taking opioids, like heroin or morphine, they are acting like endorphins. GABA. GABA chills you out. Like alcohol, Xanax, it chills you out. Oxytocin, the love hormone, the bonding, cuddling, breastfeeding, dog petting. But it's not just that, but this is what you're going to see on the test. But if you are like a Nazi and Hitler is speaking and you get goosebumps, I think that's oxytocin too. So it's a lot more complicated than that. So when we de-individuate and become part of a crowd, you might be getting oxytocin. Like I am one of a much more bigger crowd. I'm not promoting Hitler, okay? I'm just telling you about bad politics that's going on right now. All right, I've never seen this before, but substance P, I Google it, and it has to do with pain. So imagine those people who feel no pain whatsoever. They probably have problems with substance P in their nerves. Okay? All right, moving right along. Norepinephrine. It's basically adrenaline, but it acts faster than adrenaline. Think of the EpiPen, epinephrine, norepinephrine. It's basically adrenaline, but it acts faster than adrenaline. Adrenaline is a hormone. Norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter. All right, moving right along. Glutamate. Never heard of it. I had to Google it. Mood, memory, and I learned that bipolar disorder is caused by an imbalance of glutamate. I didn't know that. Stress leads to lower glutamate levels and worse memory. You don't need to write that down, but glutamate is involved with memory and mood. I have not seen this on the test before. All right, do this. The answer is endorphins. Moving right along. All right, do that. The answer is acetylcholine, muscles. Do this. The answer is serotonin. Serotonin is involved with depression. I know dopamine seems like that's tempting, but if you have too much dopamine, you'll get schizophrenia, and that could be a problem. You could become manic with too much dopamine. All right. Pain modulation, morphine are acting like which neurotransmitter? The answer is endorphins. Endorphins deal with pain. All right, do this. The answer is acetylcholine, memory, and muscle movement. All right, love. The answer is oxytocin. Okay. All right, do this. The answer is, remember, Alzheimer's and are caused by problems with acetylcholine. So is that Graves disorder that I taught you about. Okay, write this down. Agonists mimic neurotransmitters. It's like they dress up like they're at a costume and try to get in the same party. Because on the receptors, they fit the receptors for that neurotransmitters. These are drugs. Both are drugs. Nicotine is an agonist for acetylcholine. So it fits the acetylcholine receptors. Nicotine does. Morphine is an agonist for endorphins. So morphine will fit in the same receptors as endorphins and give you some of the same effects. Antagonists block neurotransmitters. Okay, so they keep these neurotransmitters from doing their thing. So there is a poison called curare, which is an antagonist for acetylcholine. Acetylcholine deals with bodily movement, so since it blocks acetylcholine, it will paralyze you, or at least it will paralyze a small animal. So if you're out in the jungle hunting for a small animal, you shoot a poison arrow at a bird and it'll paralyze it using this poison. So both of these are drugs, medicines, and poisons. Okay? This is not on the test, but Ozempic is an agonist for GLP-1. GLP-1 regulates blood sugar and hunger. So Ozempic acts like GLP-1 and messes with your blood sugar and hunger. You need to know what an agonist is, but you don't need to know how Ozempic works. Adenosine dilates your blood vessels and lets you be sleepy. Caffeine is an adenosine antagonist. Not on the test, but antagonist is. You need to know how coffee works anyway. It blocks the adenosine, which helps you to get sleepy. Okay, so I think of antagonist as like putting gum in a keyhole. It blocks the keyhole. It keeps the neurotransmitter from doing what it needs to. All right, do this. The answer is, since it blocks acetylcholine, it's an antagonist. All right, do this. The answer is, it increases the action of endorphins, so it's an agonist. It impersonates endorphins. Okay. All right, do this. The answer is an experiment. I don't want to talk about this, but hopefully this makes sense. All right, write this down. What is reuptake? So, a neuron squirts a neurotransmitter like dopamine or serotonin, something like that. Then the neuron, the button, will suck it back up. If there's too much swimming around, it'll suck it back up. That sucking it back up is called reuptake. All right. So imagine neurotransmitters swimming around between the neurons, and some of it is absorbed in the other neuron, but what's left over is sucked back up. It's like the button said, oops, I gave you too much dopamine. Let me suck that back up. That's called reuptake. All right. Sorry I didn't give you a visual. I'll give you one on another slide. Reuptake of a neurotransmitter refers to what? I don't like this question anymore. It's too specific, but it's B. Never mind. Moving right along. Okay, so how does Prozac work? In other words, how does an SSRI work? Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. All right, I'm going to play a video for you.
The human brain has about 10 billion brain cells. Each brain cell can have as many as 25,000 connections with other cells. Messages, which direct many functions throughout your body, travel through your brain from cell to cell through these connections. For these signals to move from a sending cell to a receiving cell, they must cross a small gap called the synapse. Chemicals called neurotransmitters, located at the ends of the sending cells, help the signal cross this gap. Serotonin is one such neurotransmitter, a very important one that helps regulate mood, emotions, and other body functions. After the serotonin has done its job, it's reabsorbed by the sending cell and is soon back in position to help with the next nerve signal. If you have depression, you may have a serotonin imbalance. Your overall level of serotonin may be low, and some of it may be reabsorbed too soon. As a result, communication between the brain cells is impaired. An SSRI, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, is a medication designed to help increase the amount of serotonin in the synapse by blocking its reabsorption. As serotonin builds up, normal communication between cells can resume, and your symptoms of depression may improve.
Okay, so Prozac and other similar drugs, they're called SSRIs, and think of that X as what an SSRI does. It is blocking the reabsorption, the reuptake of serotonin. Think of these yellow balls as or orange balls as serotonin. So the button squirts it out and then tries to reabsorb it, but the SSRI blocks it from happening. So you don't really need to know Prozac, but you do need to understand what an SSRI is. It includes Prozac, Zoloft, and other antidepressant medications. Cocaine works in a similar way. It inhibits the reuptake of not serotonin, but dopamine. So does it increase the dopamine in your brain? Not really, but it does block the reuptake. So it basically does increase dopamine. It really just increases the availability of dopamine, but it doesn't really increase dopamine. But anyway, that's how cocaine works. All right, so do this real quick. The answer is dopamine. All right, do this. The answer is the drug acts as a reuptake inhibitor. Okay, it's basically describing cocaine. But other drugs do it too. All right, do this. The answer is A. It makes serotonin more available, not less available. Okay. All right. Okay, moving right along. Types of neurons. You've got sensory neurons, like in your hand and your arms and your legs and your eyes. Those are sensory neurons. Then you've got motor neurons in your muscles that actually move your body and move your mouth. Those are motor neurons. Okay? So sensory neurons take information from your senses to the brain. Like, ow, I hurt myself. And then the pain is sent to my brain or to my spinal cord. That's what sensory neurons do. Motor neurons take information from the brain to the rest of the body. So it's my brain telling my body to move. That's what motor neurons do. They tell my body to move. Okay. Interneurons are neurons that are in the spine, and what they do is they transmit information from the sensory neurons to the motor neurons. So get this, and this is something that you need to know. If you were to touch a hot stove, ow, what'll happen is that the pain will go to your spine. So the sensory neuron will send the message to the spine, then it goes to the interneuron that's in the spine, and then the message is transferred to your motor neuron to pull your hand back so you don't burn yourself. And it happens fast. That's what interneurons do. They're in the spine, and they communicate between sensory and motor neurons. So if you were to burn yourself and you get like a reflex like that, your brain won't even sense it. It's your spine that does the work. Okay? So your spine is what tells your hand to move back. Your brain doesn't even do it. It's like unconscious. Okay? So the interneuron is in the spine. So the pain hits your sensory neuron. It goes to the interneuron. The interneuron tells your motor neuron to pull your hand back. That's how it works. That's called a reflex arc. All right, do this. The answer is B. So your brain is left out of it. All right, do this. The answer is, all right, receptors, you get burned, sensory neurons sent to the spine, the interneurons in the spine transfer it to the motor neurons. Your motor neurons tell you to pull your hand away from the fire. That's how it works. All right, read that. The answer is, that's called a reflex arc. And if I didn't teach you that good enough, I'm sorry. All right, do that. The answer is, all right, to the spinal cord. That's sensory neurons. Motor neurons are from the spinal cord to your muscles. All right, we're almost done. All right, so the divisions of the nervous system. You need to know what is the peripheral, really not even peripheral. Really, you need to know autonomic and somatic. But even that's not even as important as sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. All right, so this is what the College Board wants you to know. Hit pause, but I'm not going to stay here. Okay, so you need to know that the central nervous system, notice that it's highlighted in orange on the right. The central nervous system is your brain and your spinal cord. You need to know that. The central nervous system is everything inside bone, your skull and your spinal cord. Then there's everything else. Everything else is called the peripheral nervous system. That includes now I've mostly seen these two bottom on the test. I haven't seen these two very much at all. Autonomic means it happens autonomously or automatically, like your kidney's doing its thing. You don't have to consciously make your kidney do its thing. It happens autonomously. Somatic are your nerves in your muscles, in your it's all your nerves that are outside of your spine and your brain. So somatic, think soma means body. Okay. Now, I've never seen autonomic on the test, but I have seen sympathetic and parasympathetic. So I'm going to do a better job of teaching that. Here is your CNS, your central nervous system, everything inside bone, your brain and spinal cord. You do need to remember that. All right, so do this question. The answer is, all right, so yeah, sending and receiving sensory and motor signals. All right, so your sympathetic nervous system hypes you up. So it fight or flight, excitement, emergency, embarrassment, heart rate goes up, pupils dilate, bronchioles dilate so you can breathe more. So if you see something scary, your sympathetic nervous system is going to do its thing. It hypes you up. So if you see a scary snake, that's your sympathetic nervous system. That's your amygdala. Okay. Now, your parasympathetic nervous system brings you back to homeostasis, brings you back to normal. So it slows you down. So if you see a snake, then you're all hyped up. Your parasympathetic slows you back down like a parachute. If you speak Spanish, think of pare or para. Okay? Stop. So if you're sitting around, that's your sympathetic. But your parasympathetic will bring you back to homeostasis, back to normal. Okay? So pause and look at the right side and look at the left side and notice the difference. Okay? Sympathetic relaxes the bladder. That's why you piss yourself in extreme fear. Okay? All right, moving right along. All right, do this. Which of the following is reduced during fight or flight? The answer is digestion. You're not going to be focused on eating if you're running from a tiger. All right, do this. The answer is sympathetic hypes you up. Parasympathetic brings you back to homeostasis, back to normal. All right, do this. The answer is boom, hypes you up. All right. The activation of the parasympathetic nervous system results in what? The answer is, yeah, your heart rate's going to slow back down, gets back to normal. All right, I already taught this in the brain, but the endocrine system are your glands and your hormones. They are controlled by the hypothalamus. Hormones act slower than neurotransmitters. The hormones you need to know are melatonin, adrenaline, ghrelin, and leptin. Okay. This is the endocrine system. The only gland you need to know for AP psychology is the pituitary, which secretes growth hormone. Okay. All of this is controlled by the hypothalamus. Okay. So do this question. The answer is boom. All right. And that is it. Thank you very much.